So, I made an Avatar game. Well, at least the concept of one. So the reason I'm making this video is because they actually announced recently that we are getting an Avatar fighting game. Now, this is something that I kind of dabbled into quite a bit ago. So Netflix dropped Avatar in 2020, back when like the pandemic was, and I had watched Avatar for the first time, much like a lot of you guys, and they also dropped Korra, so I was able to watch both series back to back, and it was quite the experience. I really liked the characters, I liked the world, and the interactions that they all had. And at the time, I was also getting into fighting games more and more. And I thought, fuck it. Why don't I try and make a game that I think would be really cool? But there was a few issues. One, I didn't really know how to make a game. And two, I'm an idiot. But anyways, let's check out what I made. So this is actually the first draft of what I have. Proof to you guys. So you guys can read that. So it's a lot of pages of stuff. So I go pretty in depth with a lot of stuff. It's called The Legends of Avatar, but you can see there's like documents and like papers and all that stuff on it, and charts and stuff. So it was quite the endeavor. Like, it took me a long time to do this, and I would refine little things and big things over and over again. But essentially, this is what it is. It's called The Legends of Avatar. So as the name implies, I actually have characters from both Last Airbender and from Korra. So at the time, I was playing a lot of Dragon Ball FighterZ, and since that was my main game, I kind of made that almost a skeleton, if you will, of my game. Simply because I liked how easy it was to pick up and play. It was visually stunning, and it was just a lot of fun, and that was the whole point. So I wrote some bullet points here in the beginning. So again, had no experience with game design, but I was trying to be as creative as I could. Skeleton was Dragon Ball FighterZ, like I said, and I'm kind of mixing and matching certain mechanics that I liked from other series, and I'm putting them into this one. I'm not an expert on the show or the lore, but I'm a big fan, and I felt like I had a good enough mind to make characters that would be both fun to play for both pros and like, us fighting game fans, and also just casual whatever players, right? So without further ado, here's the game that we always wanted and the game that we deserve. Fingers crossed that these guys managed to pull it off. Something at least close to this. So as you can see, I kind of went ham with a lot of mechanics and stuff like that, but we'll talk about the important ones, and yeah, we'll get into it. So what's the hook of the game? So the hook of the game is the idea that it's a 4v4 fighter. So this hasn't been done before, to my knowledge. I did look into it where like KOF or like one of the SNK games, they had a version where you could pick 4 people, but the last person was like an assist or something. But like traditional 4v4, that wasn't really a thing, right? The Marvel games, and then also Dragon Ball and Skullgirls, they all have 3v3. So I just thought, there's 4 elements, there's 4 members in Team Avatar, so like might as well just make it a 4v4. It'd be a lot of fun. And another reason was that I wanted you to be able to make your own Team Avatar, because that'd be sick, So next we got the team composition. So for those of you guys that don't know, Skullgirls has a system where you can choose how many characters you actually want to play on your team. And based on the number of characters, you get certain levels of health. So you have one character, that one character has a lot of health, but you don't get assists, and it kind of goes down like that. So I made kind of like a chart of more or less how it would look. This doesn't really matter, but to sum it up, so 4 characters on the team, you're going to have the most assists, and you're going to have the most overall health. And they're great for overall damage and, for mixing up your strategy because you have so many assists. But the issue is that the characters themselves, they die quicker because individually they have lower health. So if you have 3 characters on your team, you have a slight damage buff. You have a little bit less health overall than 4 characters, but each character is a little bit more beefy. You have a faster cooldown than 4 characters, but you're down an assist. But I think it's a great balanced look because most 3v3 or most team-based fighting games are 3v3 anyway, so a lot of people are going to kind of gravitate towards that. If you want to run 2 people, they have the fastest cooldown, they have the tankiest people like individually in a team. They also get a damage buff compared to a team of 3, but the drawback is you only have 1 assist, and so like that assist is normally have to be very good in order for you to run this team. But yeah, you got 2 tanky-ish characters that are gonna, they're gonna hit hard. And then finally, if you want to just run 1 character, kind of like a final boss, you can do that. And what they're going to have is the most health, like individually for a character. They're going to do the most damage individually for a character. They're also going to have access to 2 installs where every other team only has 1 activation. But obviously the drawback is you have no assist, so if your character is not good, you're not getting any health. So that's basically the rundown on how that works. So another thing I wanted to get into was like the individual bending styles of all the characters. Characters that bend the same element, they kind of have like a similar property. So for waterbenders, we basically have it so that each one of them has at least one healing or health leeching move. So now you can form a team having a waterbender, and you know that they're going to be like kind of helping out your team healing wise, like support and defensive wise. Earthbenders are going to have armor on their moves, and they're going to be really great at controlling like screen space on the floor because, you know, they're earthbenders. Firebenders are going to be able to inflict burn damage, which is a unique form of chip damage, and they're going to be able to use their fire jets to do like dashes and things like that. They're mainly going to be your pressure and rushdown characters. And then airbenders, obviously, they're going to have the best air mobility, you know? They're going to have all the extra double jumps, the bunch of air dashes and things like that. So they're going to be mainly based off mobility. If you're one of the avatars like Aang or Korra, well, you're based off what part of the cycle you are. So Aang, for example, is going to be a lot more mobile in the air than someone like Korra is. And then non-benders are going to be immune to chi blocking, which I'll explain that a little later. Might sound crazy, but yeah, that's why you would pick a non-bender. But they're mainly going to be mix-up characters for the most part. So the point of all this is that you can kind of pick pieces of a puzzle and put them on your team, and everybody's team is going to look different in how they want to use a strategy. Or if you want to, for example, commit to a super team of healers, then you could do that, right? So, you know, I just wanted compositions of teams to be very unique from player to player, and, you know, kind of see what's up. So what I wanted to do in the game is add an install system. For those of you guys that don't know what an install is essentially kind of like going Super Saiyan almost. But in this game, I called it Spirit Install, and the way it would work lore-wise would be essentially the spirits kind of come in and they like buff your character. And characters are going to have very different properties depending on what. It's not going to be a universal thing. So someone like Aang, he goes into the avatar state, but someone like Sokka, he's not going to go into the avatar state, right? So he's going to have different properties on certain moves, like maybe his boomerang does something different, or his sword does extra damage. I wanted to make sure that you get maybe a speed and a damage boost, but it's not going to heal you. We want the healers to be the waterbenders, so I kept it like that. So for movement, I'm kind of using the same foundation that Dragon Ball FighterZ and the Marvel games have. It's pretty simple. You know, you got your ground dashes, you got your air dashes. But the thing about it is that the characters, based off who they are, they're going to have different properties on that. So like someone like Toph shouldn't be flying through the air like someone like Aang. Like it just doesn't make any sense. So we're going to make it so that everybody's kind of unique in how they move. But if you're part of a certain, you know, element, you're going to move similar to the other people in that element. So for combat, I wanted it to be a 4-button fighter, just because Dragon Ball FighterZ and even Marvel, they kind of make it kind of easy. So you got your light attack, you got your medium attack, you got your heavy attack, and then bending attack, which we'll get into a little later. You got your assist buttons, you got your burst, we'll talk about that later, your throws, your lunges, installs, reflects, all that stuff. So yeah, just pretty simple. These would be like kind of like the default buttons that I put. So light attacks supposed to be quick, short buttons that take your turn back. Medium buttons are supposed to be a little bit longer range, slightly slower, but they kind of start your combos a little better and deal more damage. And then you got your heavy attacks that are kind of big and beefy, and they're going to be the ones that can be used as combo enders sometimes. So the order of stuff would be, you know, your typical like your light, your medium, your heavy, then to your special, and then into your super. But your bending attack, which we'll get into, can kind of fit in between any of these, and depending on what it is, you can kind of like mix and match and like put it in. But before we get into the crazy stuff, let's talk defense, because I think defense is like an important thing in the game. So first we start with blocking. So there's going to be normal stand block, crouch block, but we also wanted to make sure that chicken blocking wasn't a thing. So if you don't know what that is, it's basically when you're blocking and you jump up and it kind of like lets you avoid mix-ups. I didn't want that in, so you're vulnerable if you jump up. But yeah, then also adding something that I found in Marvel, which is the push block. I think that's a really cool mechanic, but we would make it just cost a bar a meter. And then also being able to tag in your character, kind of like a guard cancel in Dragon Ball, is also going to be in the game. So I wanted to add also like kind of like a deflect or a parry system in the game. This one wouldn't cost any meter, but it's a move that you can use to deal with projectiles and deal with like people that are kind of mixing you. But if you whiff your parry, you're going to take extra damage just to balance it out, you know? So like the characters will be like using their elements when they're dodging stuff. So I remember there's like a clip of like Toph putting up like barriers of earth, or Aang using like his wind to kind of stop stuff. I just thought it'd be another way that you can use the elements that isn't just their special moves and things like that. So I wanted to add a burst mechanic in the game just because I think it's a lot of fun to use. You don't want to be hit in like an infinite combo, right? I just find that lame. And in Dragon Ball, sometimes those combos will last forever. But with a burst, you're able to break out of it. So essentially, if you haven't played Guilty Gear before, a burst is a move that you could use. It's kind of like a combo breaker, right? And there's different types. And in my game, there's 3 different types. So there's the blue one that you use when you're actually being hit. And it kind of just like pushes you away. Let's say we make it purple, so I'll copy the same color. You got your gold burst, which we call it in this one the meter burst, where you can use the burst in neutral, and then if you happen to hit your opponent, then you get a little bit of meter and they get pushed back. And then finally you got the red burst. So the red burst is essentially like a projectile counter almost. So if you time a move correctly, like it could be like a super or something like that, you time it correctly, it basically reverses the move and send it straight back to the opponent. I just thought it'd be a cool idea as far as projectiles go, to just be able to fling it back. So one of the ideas I had was something like Zuko redirecting lightning. That would be like his red burst animation, so stuff like that. So also what I wrote down was that your install and your burst, they're tied together. So you can't use your burst while you're in your install. It's kind of a similar concept to how Street Fighter V has it, where you can't use your V shift or your defensive V trigger moves if you're in V trigger. So it kind of makes the player think of like, oh, do I want to cash in and like use my super offense, or do I want to kind of stay a little bit more defensive? So let's get into offense. So for offense, the first thing we're going to target is the bending attack, which I mentioned earlier. So what this is, I took the idea from Injustice. For those of you guys that don't know, in that game, every character has different traits, and what it is that you press a button and it does a certain action for the character. So for Batman, he's got his little bat drones, and for Superman, when he presses that same button, he gets like a damage buff. So for every character is going to be different. For some people, it's going to be maybe projectiles, maybe it's a movement option, maybe it's a stand switch. It could be literally anything. And depending on what they actually do, then they'll have cooldowns or they won't have cooldowns, but yeah. So an example for like Aang, let's say, is that his bending attack that I made was that he uses his glider. And sometimes they could be offensively based and sometimes defensively based, sometimes mobility based. So it could be literally anything. You could almost think of it as like an extra special move. So command normals, I kind of ripped it straight from Dragon Ball just because I thought the system was pretty good. So everybody has a universal overhead. In this case, it'd be 6M, so forward and your medium attack. You have your 2M, which is going to be universal low, so it kind of pops the opponent up. And then you have your 5H or your 2H, that is your universal launchers that let you do into combos. Obviously, characters will have more command normals, but I wanted everybody to kind of have the base set of that, just so, you know, you're still kind of familiar playing a character and you're not completely lost. So I wanted a way to reward players for making the right reads at the right time. And so that's when I came up with armor breakers. So armor breakers are going to be used to break armor and then also to break burst attacks. So these moves can be done in the air or on the ground, and they're literally for that. And when you do land one of these moves at the right time, you know, breaking either armor or a burst, you get extra damage and you kind of get like this slow-mo effect that's going to be cool for, you know, kind of viewers at home. But outside of the normal use, so you can keep spamming these moves, but if your opponent never bursts or never uses armor, then like they really don't do that much damage. So it's more like you need to time it perfectly in order for you to get that big damage. So for throws, I wanted a throw indicator just because like if there's 8 people moving around, like you're not going to know what's going on. So a throw indicator I think is decent, like a decent idea. So I kind of took it from Dragon Ball. When you do Dragon Rush in Dragon Ball, you kind of get like that green thing and it shows that you're throwing them. So here it could be like a little white spark that you see and then they do it. They can be done in the air and on the ground. And then if you are in the air, you can kind of spike them down and kind of continue the combo that way. And then, yeah, you could snap your opponent's characters in and out, kind of like any other traditional versus game. So one of the issues that a lot of people had with Dragon Ball is that there wasn't really any chip damage. And so I wanted to make sure that that wasn't the case. So we're adding chip damage in this game. So when you block, you're going to take some of that. And I wanted to add this so that people are kind of mixing in their defensive options and not just sitting there and blocking. Like you want to be active on defense. So I mentioned some of the firebenders have this thing called burn damage. So burn damage is kind of akin to like poison that Aki has, like in Street Fighter 6, but it even happens on block. So you don't actually need to land a clean hit, but it kind of stacks with chip damage. And that normally is only going to happen once your character's in install or you do some certain action for that to happen. But I just think that's a lot of fun. And then people that are very pressure oriented will pick the firebenders because of that. But importantly, chip damage, burn damage, or even supers, if they don't kill, right? So you have to land a clean hit or a clean throw in order for you to finish off your opponent. Because I don't think, at least to me, it's not fun if, okay, I ran out of resources, but I'm blocking you perfectly and I die. Like, to me, that doesn't make much sense. So as far as tagging in, I wanted to kind of use the system that MVCI had. I thought it was a lot of fun being able to just do a special move and then your teammate kind of comes in kind of covered by that stuff. I know that Project L is coming out maybe within the next 2 years. And so at the time of me making this thing, I didn't really know of its existence. But they've had some kind of cool ideas that I might be able to revision and like kind of add on to this if I ever make a follow-up on this on like how I would make it different. But yeah, that's what kind of I wrote down. And everybody would have at least 2 assists on launch. I don't want to make it 3 because I felt like 3 is going to be like, you might have way too many options, but we'll start at launch anyway. We'll start at 2 and see kind of how it goes. I don't want to limit it to 1 because if you limit to 1, then people are only going to pick a character based off their assist. And that's not really what I want. That's the issue you had in Dragon Ball early on where you would only play, Super Saiyan Goku because he's got a beam and nobody else has a beam, So I don't want that situation to come up. So for your supers, everyone's got a level 1 and everyone's got a level 3. And level 4s are going to be things that are like extensions of level 3. So in Dragon Ball, your level 3, you can spend a little bit more meter and you get a level 5, kind of like Gogeta or something like that. You would have a projectile priority system, and I wanted to make sure like there was clashing. I like that in Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat you don't have clashing. I just find that a little weird. And in Avatar it's actually cool, to see the elements kind of clash and things like that. So, you got your light projectiles that are quick, but they don't do a lot of damage. You got your medium ones, which are like kind of like your normal projectiles, right? Your heavy ones, which normally only happen once you charge something. And then you got your super projectiles, which based off their level, they're gonna have a different priority. Yeah, and then you'd have this kind of a similar system for strikes. So you land 2 mediums, they're gonna clash. So I just think that's the way it should be. So before I get into the last section, which is like the roster and the stages, I just had a few final notes. So number 1 is going to be, you need to have a very good visual style on this. Like the art style's got to be, like it's got to be really good, because if people see it and it looks ugly, they're just not going to play it, right? After that, to keep people hooked on a game, you have to make it, like even the small, simple things, like very satisfying to do. So things like auto combos, I think Dragon Ball FighterZ really got that right. And that's why it was able to be so successful. Not just because the IP is big, but also it's a lot of fun to play. And even if you suck, like it's still fun to kind of press buttons and things like that. The whole point is having a low floor and a high ceiling, so that players kind of learn new things as they go on and they have a lot more fun and they want to learn more. Obviously, matchmaking, netcode, rollback, no discussion. Also for ranked, I wanted to make sure that it's pretty strict, but if you're a lower ranked player, you have the opportunity to fight higher ranked players if you want to. So if you want to go up in ranks because, maybe your connection's not as good, but you want to play against people like that, you can totally do that. Give it a good tutorial. Guilty Gear Strive is like pretty good at their tutorial, I would say. But yeah, it shouldn't really be our job to kind of teach people how to play. You should be able to learn from the game itself. And then I want to make sure that single player content is also key, because if you just drop with very bare bones stuff, people are going to get mad at you very quickly if that single player content is not, kind of not good. Everyone loves the story in these franchises, so I feel like it should have a story mode and kind of mix in some stuff. Doesn't have to be canon, but like just a what if scenario would be kind of cool to have, bringing like these characters together from both franchises. and having an arcade mode, survival mode, and then we want to have that unlockable content, right? So like your skins, your colors, your music tracks, your artwork, and all that stuff. So yeah, let's just make it a complete thing. So we can kind of go down on like some of the stages that I thought would be cool. I don't remember how many I added, but we'll just go through them. So you got the Western Air Temple from Avatar: The Last Airbender. I just thought it had a really cool design, so I picked this one. From Korra, you got the Red Lotus Cave. You can maybe have Korra in the background tied up. I think it's just like a beautiful design. Obviously, where the final Agni Kai takes place. Your Earth Kingdom throne room, I think would be really cool. You want a city stage, right? So like Streets of Republic City, that kind of, duh. And then also the police blimp, like on top of the blimp, would be really cool. Or just maybe having a rooftop stage where you see the blimp, that would also be fun. The Air Temple Island from Korra would also be cool. The Swamp Forest, you could either do the one that Korra visited or the one back then Avatar. Spirit Portal we already saw in All-Star Brawl, and that was pretty cool. Northern Water Tribe, I mean, just look at that backdrop. It'd be sick. It kind of reminds you of like Winter's Wonderland or Bones Wonderland, whatever it is from Marvel. Your Wulong Forest, so this is where Ozai and Aang fought in their final battle, so duh. This was a cool one. This was from Korra when they destroyed the Northern Air Temple. Zahir and his the Red Lotus, they destroyed that, and so in the background you can have it kind of like melting and you're kind of fighting in the mountains. Be sick. Ba Sing Se, but remember there is no war in Ba Sing Se. Ember Island, duh. Crystal Caverns is kind of similar to the other stage, the Red Lotus Cave. But yeah, I thought it was cool. You could add either or. The Spirit Forest at the very end of Korra, be a very unique stage, and maybe that could be part of the lore as to why like the spirits are kind of like giving you installs and things like that. Zaofu, where you could see like the background of that, or the plains, which I thought was really cool. The Zaofu Plains, where you have all of Kuvira's army. That would be sick. I'm just saying that would be sick. Pro Bending Arena, because like obviously, duh, it's a fighting. That'd be like your kind of like your octagon stage or like your boxing ring stage, right? It's Pro Bending Arena. And then you got the rooftop of that when the blimp came down and they kind of got attacked by I think it was Amon's forces or something like that. So yeah, that would be cool because you'd see the city at night and then you have the rooftop. Earth Rumble, because duh, of course. That was the first like stadium we found. Like there's like the early stages of like pro bending, I guess. And then you got the Fire Nation throne room because, of course. What I thought would be pretty cool actually is that if you activate a super and like it ends a round or like it like knocks off a character, there could be stage transitions. So like a perfect example would be like the Pro Bending Arena going into the rooftop, right? The Zaofu into Zaofu Plains, you know, so things like that I think would be cool. So for the roster, I wanted to make sure there was a good balance of both the characters that we like, but then also have like a good ratio on like how many of each elements there are. So I tried to balance it out. Base starting roster, I put 24 characters, and these are actually the 24 characters that I finished and I made full movesets for. If you guys want to see that, then we can explore another video based off how this one does. But this is kind of the roster that I made. So first, of course, from Avatar, we got Aang. He is an Avatar, and he's going to be your only airbender when it comes to The Last Airbender, because it's The Last Airbender. Then from Korra, we got Korra herself. So she's an Avatar, waterbender. Going back to Avatar, you got Katara and Sokka. Obviously, Katara's a waterbender. You got Sokka that he's not. But as your first non-bender, he's got to be kind of cool, like to fight with, right? So he's gonna be having like his sword and his boomerang and all that stuff. You got Mako and Bolin. Duh, those are Korra's, they're her boys, so of course they're gonna be there. Earth and Fire. You got Toph and Zuko, Earth and Fire on the Avatar, The Last Airbender side. You have Asami and Tenzin from Korra. Again, a non-bender and another airbender. You got Zuko, you gotta have Azula. And if you have Azula, you gotta have Ozai. So I have both of them also in this game. Then we have some villains from Korra. So I have Amon, he's a bloodbender, but he's originally a waterbender. So we're gonna have him. And then we have Lin Beifong, who is Toph's daughter, I think eldest daughter. So She's gonna be a metal bender. She uses her whips and like earth bending and things like that. Obviously, we gotta have Ty Lee in there. Ty Lee is not gonna be considered a traditional bender, but she's gonna have a really cool ability that if we make that video, you guys will see. She's got key blocking, and that's pretty cool. Ty Lee, and then Iroh. Of course, if you want to run a team of Iroh and Zuko, of course you could do that. Why wouldn't I let you do that? Then you have Gazan, so he's a member of the Red Lotus. So the reason I picked him is because he's an earthbender, but his unique thing is that he uses lava. So you're kind of mixing a firebender and an earthbender there. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then General Bumi. So General Bumi is Tenzin or Aang's oldest son. And we're going to have him where he is an airbender, but he's going to be kind of like your gag character almost. Simply because he just has no idea how to use it. So he's kind of like running and gunning basically. So we'll do the final three on Avatar The Last Airbender. So you got Suki. Obviously, it's Sokka's girlfriend for a good while in the show. And she uses weapons and she's like a very good martial artist. You have Mai, who's Zuko's girl in that show. And she's going to be using a lot of projectiles. She's going to be kind of like a typical zoner. And then you have June. So June is going to be using the giant anteater. The name is escaping me, but the giant anteater kind of badger thing that she's got. And she's going to be able to jump from the badger and off of it over and over again. And then your final three on the starting roster are going to be Kaya. She is obviously Katara and Aang's only daughter. And she's a waterbender. You have Jinora, who's Aang's granddaughter. She's going to be a spirit bender, but then also an airbender. And then finally we have Zahir in the list. So that's my list for the roster. We can kind of go into like the DLC. What I thought, the DLC, I haven't made a move list for them. But these are people that I wanted to get to after I was done. So I was thinking 4 DLC packs, 4 characters and everything, because everything is 4, you know? So DLC 1, you got Ming Hua. She's a waterbender, part of the Red Lotus. You have Su Yin, so this is Lin Beifong's sister, or Toph's other daughter, metal bender and earth, right? You have Roku, who is another avatar, so he's going to be your first firebender avatar. And then Jet from Avatar The Last Airbender, where he uses kind of his hook swords and things like that. DLC 2, you have Kai, who is Opal's, it's actually Kai and Opal, so you could switch between them because they would have a similar body frame. I'm thinking season 4, and they're airbenders. You have Unalak, who is a waterbender, but you can kind of have your install be like the dark avatar or like a spirit bender. You have King Bumi, who's the earthbender, not to be confused with General Bumi. You have Pli, who has like a skin for Combustion Man, so she is a firebender, also part of the Red Lotus. DLC 3, I have Varric with Zhu Li, so he's using his science, like all of his guns and all that stuff. Zhu Li, do the thing, so he's gonna have like a giant beam. I thought it'd be cool. You have Hugh, which is like the big swamp monster from Avatar The Last Airbender. I thought he'd be really cool, and he'd be like one of your bigger characters, right? Kuvira, metal bender. She's just an elite metal bender, and I think she'd be a great addition. You have Kyoshi, who is obviously the avatar that came before Roku, and she like kind of has similarities to Suki, or at least Suki. Her society is kind of structured based off of Kyoshi. And then for DLC 4, I have Avatar State Korra, so like the enraged one from season 3 with the chain and like kind of like the crazy hair and all that stuff and like the torn clothing. You have Piandao, who is the sword master that taught Sokka how to use a sword. You have Paku, who is Katara's original waterbender master, or at least the one that she kind of showed up. And then you have Avatar Wan, which is the first avatar. So yeah, that's my list on the roster. If you guys liked this idea that I made, again, I never made the actual game, but I spent a lot of time on this stuff. So if you guys want to see what I thought of for the Avatar roster, the Korra roster, whatever it is, yeah, drop a like, leave a comment, and subscribe. This has been The Legends of Avatar.